Buds.
You're listening to Biz Buds. Super authentic, actionable advice.
We're going to open the kimono and show you what's inside.
I'm scared to see inside Mike's kimono.
Hey, it's Mike and Tom with Biz Buds.
If you like geeking out over business, marketing, and entrepreneurship, this is the podcast for you. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 7 of Biz Buds. This week, I'm here again with my man, Mike Janda. What's up, Mike?
Hey, happy to be here. Episode 7 already. Can you believe it?
Damn, we're prolific.
I know, for real. We haven't even launched episode 1 yet.
Don't tell people that. It's all going to seem
you know
seamless.
We're all about full disclosure on Biz Buds.
Yeah, so we've been batch recording in advance of launching this show, which, of course, by the time you hear this, will have been long launched.
Yes.
I got to tell you, podcasting, it's never been easier to start one. Doesn't mean it's that easy. We're still battling around in iTunes and all this kind of stuff. So, today, though, we are talking about imposter syndrome. And right before we started recording, Mike said whenever he brings this up, his audience engage like crazy. It's a topic that really means a lot to people. And I've experienced the same thing in my community and through my business and the community we have there. This is something I think that is so prevalent. Every creative and probably every human being feels imposter syndrome at some point, right? It's like saying, do you breathe?
Yeah, it really is. If you're ambitious in any manner about going and getting a job or building a business or trying to progress in any manner, you probably have felt some measure of imposter syndrome, because we don't grow. If you don't feel imposter syndrome, you're not growing. You're not putting yourself in situations that are outside of your comfort zone, so you feel abnormal in your efforts.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I tend to feel abnormal pretty often.
You do. I was going to say that about you, that for you it seems frequent, whether it's imposter syndrome related or not. But no, the truth
that's
is,
just a personality defect, Mike. That's
no,
fine.
it's not. So why don't we kick off by really honing in and defining what imposter syndrome is? How is this defined in the normal psyche of people? When we hear that term, what are we referring to? What are your initial thoughts on that, Tom?
My initial thoughts are it's very closely linked to self-doubt. And when I feel like an imposter, I feel like I don't deserve the success I have.
Yeah.
I feel like it's all going to go away, and I feel like I'm incapable of achieving my future aspirations.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to do it. So imposter syndrome, it's self-doubt, it's lack of confidence, it's feeling like you're a fraud in some facet. I've had, when I was running my business, we would win awards and things. And when we would have a project that would win Best in Show, or when my agency won, a big award, there were only 10 in the whole state, and my agency won one for our categories, and I had to give this acceptance speech at a black tie affair and things. And you're standing up there and you're giving your award speech, and there's a certain measure of, do I really deserve this? I mean, there are other businesses that have done more amazing things than me. And I think a lot of imposter syndrome comes because we're comparing ourselves to other people. You look at it and say, oh yeah, I may have won this award, or I may have this level of success, but look at so-and-so. They're so much better than me. Why am I the one receiving this?
Yeah, and I think... Have you, this is going very personal and very honest, have you ever experienced any mental health issues in any propensity?
I'm prone to anxiety. I've got, and a lot of ambitious entrepreneurs you just operate at such a high stress level for so long that it becomes overwhelming. It's just a lifestyle that has caused me to have to battle some anxiety. I manage it, going to the gym and good eating and sleeping and, videos, Netflix and things are ways to help me manage that. But I've got a jitter knee, man. You know, the bouncy, I've got a bouncy leg because by default, because I just always have it in me.
Yeah, and I'm very similar. You know, I think we're similar with how we operate, and I definitely feel anxiety at points. It's not like every week or every day, but I have had full-on panic attacks, and it can be very hard and very full-on and stressful. Being a creative entrepreneur. And when you're in that mindset, you're not feeling on top of the world. So whilst I haven't been, I would say, full on chronically depressed or anything, it makes you feel a bit more depressive. You're not in the best spot. And the reason I mention mental health is I almost lump imposter syndrome in with it to an extent, because when I'm feeling that really hard, it does make me feel more depressive, and it does actually defy logic, because with mental health, you can't simply think your way out of it. People will try and point out, but you shouldn't be anxious because of XYZ reasons, or look at all this great stuff you have going for you. It doesn't matter. You can't just black and white use logic to dig your way out of imposter syndrome always. And case in point, like I feel it all the time. I don't think it matters what level you're at in your career. Like, I've had some tremendous successes in recent years, and I will still feel like a complete imposter at points. And I have done recently even. And I've literally written down on paper some of the reasons why logically, you know, that makes no sense. Why I definitely am an expert, the track record I've had, the results I've achieved and continue to achieve, and the help I give people. And you know, it's like indisputable on paper that I'm not an imposter and that I do have expertise, but it doesn't matter, because I just have this sinking, horrible feeling of being a complete fraud and imposter, and no amount of logic can get me out of that. You know what I'm talking about?
So it's the same with me. So I'll go back in the history of my career. I've been doing this for 24 years. The last 18 years have been agency ownership, you know, growing and building an agency, 3 times Inc. 5,000, 2 published books, and 100,000 followers on Instagram. And there are times when I feel like, man, what am I even talking about here? You know, I'm on a podcast. We're doing a podcast, Biz Buds Podcast. What am I even talking about? What do I even have to share to people? But I've climbed all these mountains, so logically it doesn't make sense. But if you have a morsel of humility in your life, then you're probably going to feel some imposter syndrome. And most people have a morsel of humility. They're the 1%ers that get there and don't feel it. They don't feel they don't feel imposter syndrome. They lead you to
believe they don't feel it.
Oh, they lead you to believe. Yeah, it's true. I did a little research before our call about imposter syndrome and when this all started. When did this term start? And it started back in 1978. I was surprised to hear that because I hadn't heard of the term imposter syndrome probably until the last 5 years or so. So it took, a good 30 years for imposter syndrome term to become mainstream usage the way that it is now. So back in 1978, psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes wrote a paper that they theorized that women were uniquely affected by imposter syndrome. That is the first identifiable usage of the term imposter syndrome from that paper in 1978. I thought that was interesting because you hear about it.
I'm happy we're representing all the men out there.
I know, finally. Okay, so in that same article that I found that information, there was an article I read in Time magazine by Abigail Abrams, and the title of the article is "Yes, Imposter Syndrome is Real. Here's How to Deal with It." In that article, it does say it affects men and women independently. There's no gender bias for imposter syndrome. There's no reason for that. But there was this interesting quote that I'll read here as well. So this quote says, There's no single answer. Some experts believe it has to do with personality traits like anxiety and neuroticism. So it's interesting that you brought up, hey, Mike, do you have any mental health issues? Mm-hmm. And my go-to is anxiety. Yes, I deal with that. So anxiety and neuroticism, while others focus on family or behavioral causes, Irvin explains, this is Abigail Abrams quoting somebody, last name Irvin, sometimes childhood memories such as feeling that your grades were never good enough for your parents or that your siblings outshone you in certain areas can leave a lasting impact. People often internalize these ideas that in order to be loved or be lovable, I need to achieve, says Irvin. Mm-hmm. It becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. So if you're thinking about imposter syndrome, no matter what you accomplish, you need to keep achieving to somehow earn the love and admiration that you were denied when you were a child psychologically.
Damn, we're going deep here.
This is deep stuff.
But I love it, and that's the whole purpose of this show and any content that we try and put out, right? It's about as open as you can get. So interestingly, I've almost found the opposite to be true in my family, because I got one younger brother, and when we grew up, I was actually the one that got like the better grades. Okay. And he's super smart, but I was one of those annoying kids where I just kind of figured out how to game it, I think. I just knew what the examiner wanted to hear. Yeah. So I got like the straight A's and that kind of thing. And it pissed me off, and it pissed off my parents, where teachers would actually like compare us and say to him, oh, you should be more like your brother. And that's a terrible thing. And so that was kind of us growing up, and rather than my parents like not encouraging me, they almost did the opposite, where they were like piling on praise and huge expectations, but in a positive way, where it's like, oh, like you're the best and the smartest, and you know, really great at this and that. Yeah. And I think ultimately that was a good thing. What's weird is how it's worked out is I'd say my brother is the more balanced one. Yeah, because he's like a family man now. He's younger than me, but you know he's got a kid. I haven't. And he just seems super balanced and happy in life. Maybe he's got some demons going on that I don't know about, but he always seems like very chilled as a personality and less neurotic for sure.
That's really interesting.
I'm like more of the highly ambitious neurotic entrepreneur where I constantly am needing that like affirmation. And, you know, people to tell me I'm doing a good job, and I need to kind of prove it to someone or myself or whatever, and do better and better. And I'm on that hamster wheel. Yeah. And it sounds like you're kind of more like me than my brother.
Well, for sure, man. I mean, so here's my psychological self-analysis. I grew up with 4 brothers, and I'm the second oldest. I was 14 months younger than my older brother. Mm-hmm. And I'm the biggest of brothers. I have 3 brothers that are tall like me, and one who's big and broad like me. But my oldest brother is the smallest of all of us. And when I was raised, my parents raised me and my older brother as the big boys, and the 3 younger brothers, because there was a 3-year gap between me and the next one, as the little guys. So there are the big boys and the little guys, and I was always lumped in with my older brother as the big boys, even though I was 14 months younger than him. So psychologically, I think that there was probably something from a very young age of always thinking, I need to keep up. I got to keep up with my older brother. I always, in order to stay in the big boy wording, I got to keep up with my older brother. We literally had our training wheels taken off of our bicycles on the same day. He had his off, I wanted mine off. And so I think if you went and diagnosed me psychologically, there's definitely some weird stuff in my drive and ambition that stems from growing up in this environment with 4 brothers and being a year younger than my oldest brother, and always feeling like I have to measure up and achieve. The other thing I'd say about my upbringing is my parents were never the overzealously, I'm proud of you type of parents. Super amazing parents, amazingly fair and great, deep, good-hearted people. But if you brought home good grades, it was never like, oh, wow, Mike, way to go. I'm so proud of you. You're doing amazing. I never got that growing up.
Add it to the pile, Mike.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, I never got it. I never got that. And so I think that there's something psychologically that pushes me to try and receive that somewhere because I feel like it was denied. Now, if my parents are listening to this podcast, they're probably thinking, that's not true. We gave you tons of praise. And I'm sure that they did. But
it didn't feel like it.
Perception is reality. And so for my perception, it was never a coddling, super praiseworthy type of environment.
And that's really interesting because I was the older sibling and you were the younger sibling relative to your brother.
Uh-huh.
I got a ton of praise and you didn't get so much. And we turned out the freaking same. We both still got imposter syndrome. So
interesting.
There seems to be like no rhyme or reason.
Imposter syndrome is no respecter of persons. It is something that plagues a lot of people.
I think to your earlier point, though, it has something to do with insecurity. And no one likes to admit that they're insecure, but I definitely have my insecurities. And I remember even back at school in art class, I would have to be told by my teacher, like, good job, that piece is great. And I would feel so elated when that happened.
Yeah.
And I would rely far too much on like the affirmations from external parties. I would not feel confident enough just to look and think, I did an amazing job with that piece of art. I don't care what anyone says, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I need it kind of ratified by them.
Yeah.
And I think that carries through to an extent, and it becomes really exacerbated with social media and the like, and with business. So now, I've got a community with my business who validating that stuff.
Yeah.
And I got 25,000 people on Instagram who are validating that stuff. And I got like counts and revenue numbers that are validating that stuff, that are basically telling you at huge scale, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Great job. Keep it up. You're doing a good job. And it feels good. And you're getting the dopamine and all the rest of it. Yeah. And the second that wanes for a second, you're like, oh man, only 2 people told me today, not 20.
Exactly.
Like, I must suck. And how freaking like insecure must that make me / us if you're the same as me? I hate that. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I was like, Mr. Confident 100% of the time, where I'm like, I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't need their opinions. Like, I'm just going to do my thing. Yeah. But being completely honest, like, I feed off that stuff like the rest of us.
Yeah. Same exact thing. And the problem with this mentally is that when you have 25,000 followers and 1,500 likes on your post, you don't feel validated, and you think, oh, maybe when I have 3,000 likes on my post and 100,000 followers, then I won't feel it anymore. Then I'll feel sufficient validation. But I can tell you, when you get that, it feels the exact same, because there's always a bigger metric. There's always oh man, I had this post that got 7,000 likes before. Why did this one only get 1,800 likes? I feel so bad. Instead of thinking 1,800 people liked this, and 3,000 people saved this, and 300 people commented on this, why is that validation not enough for us?
It's ridiculous. And the crazy thing is, 12 months ago, you would have, killed to get those numbers.
I didn't ever think that it was going to be. I thought by the end of the year, I might have 30,000 followers. And, 8 months later, I have 100,000. And you still feel like, oh, there's a bigger mountain to climb. And I think this is the problem. And this is why imposter syndrome is tied so much to ambition and drive. And one of the big points that I want to make in this podcast today is that if you don't feel some measure of imposter syndrome, you are probably not growing in your career. You're probably not pushing yourself to get out of your comfort zone, to do something you've never done, to pivot and change your brand position, to take on responsibilities for things that you've never done before in your life. If you're not feeling that at some point in your life right now, you're probably not growing. Because if you're completely confident and secure in your daily responsibilities, then and you feel no imposter syndrome, then you're not pushing yourself. So we look at imposter syndrome and say, okay, this is a bad thing. Well, we can use this as a tool for drive to help us grow as well. Embrace it. Get out of your comfort zone. Feel a little imposter syndrome. Fake it till you make it. All those cliche phrases apply.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to reframe it. But again, I come back to the point, I don't think you can ever think your way out of it.
Yeah.
Not really. I think it comes from within.
Yeah.
And so as we've proven, no matter what scale you reach, no matter how many followers you get, it will follow you.
Yeah.
And it will never go away because you carry it within yourself. It's not really determined by the external factors. They might be the catalyst, but it's kind of rooted in something deeper.
Yeah.
Within yourself. And unfortunately, we can give all the good advice in the world. Like one piece of advice I see around this topic is just stop and be grateful for what you have and stop chasing what you don't have. That sounds great. That's good advice on paper.
How long does that last?
But try doing it.
Yeah.
Try doing it, because you're sat there and you'll be like, I'm so thankful for this audience. I'm so thankful for this business, for all the stuff I got. That's amazing. But it's just empty words, because when you're there and you got that horrible sinking feeling and you feel like a complete fraud, you can tell yourself those affirmations all day long. And I don't want to be like the bearer of like terrible news here, guys, but I'd rather be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because hopefully there's people listening that have been through that just like I have and like you have, Mike. And they're thinking, you know what? Like, I don't feel so terrible. I feel like a lot of people maybe perceive that others are out there and they say a couple of positive affirmations and then it all floats away and they keep on going. And if you have found that not to be the case, it's because it's not really the case for anyone, I don't think. Yeah. If it were that easy, imposter syndrome wouldn't exist.
Yeah. So it gets, I'll tell you a couple places where I used to feel a lot of imposter syndrome and now I don't feel imposter syndrome. So to give some hope to people, you can go away. This issue can go away after you receive a certain measure of accomplishment, I think. So I do coaching sessions now for a lot of creative entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are 1 to 5 person agencies or independent freelancers that are bursting at the seams, trying to figure out how to grow. I get on these coaching sessions and I have zero concern about my ability to provide value to this individual, because I've been there so long in my life and I came out the other side with achievement and success. I know the path. And so I can go to these people and say, here's how you expand and grow your business. But if I were hired as a consultant by RGA, who's a mega agency, or Pentagram, a mega agency, if they hired me as a consultant to come in and say, how do we take Pentagram from where we are today and expand to the next level?
No clue.
Imposter syndrome. I would have a clue of ideas. I would say, okay, here I could create a workshop for that, but it's not any proven advice that I have done myself. I've not taken 1,000 person agency to be a global 3,000 person agency. I haven't done it. But I think that I have the knowledge to provide value in that, but there's no way that I could present that workshop without standing in front of that thinking, I'm an imposter up here. I've never done this before. You know what I'm saying?
Like if someone said to us, we were CEOs and founders of 20 people companies, if suddenly someone headhunted you and said, we want you to be CEO of Apple.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have like 40 years experience, and
right.
I've never been at anywhere near that level of magnitude. Like,
yeah,
exactly.
I think but you're never going to be the CEO of Apple if you don't start biting off more than you can chew. That's an American phrase. Do you have that in
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yep.
Biting off more than you can chew. Taking on something that is out of your comfort zone. Saying yes when you really have no clue how to execute on this. When I was hired at Fox, I went through a barrage of interviews at Fox for a creative director position. This is in 2000. So this is 20 years ago now. I go through this barrage of interviews, and I remember sitting there with the marketing director. I was 28 years old, and I was sitting there with the marketing director, and she asked me if I'd ever done a style guide before. And, I was like 3 years into my career, man. I had never done a style guide, especially for Fox. Yeah. And I was like, I was like, no, I've never done that before, but, I can figure it out. That's what I said in the interview. Surprisingly, yeah, I can figure it out. And I think that, and I landed the job, and I ended up producing 2 style guides for Fox, one for Fox Kids, one for Fox Family, and they were massive. I mean, hundreds of pages of content. The Fox Kids one's 85-page style guide of content, and it's just thick with detail. I had never done it before. So biting off more than you can chew with the confidence that, yes, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to become a master of figuring stuff out in my career. That is a way to overcome imposter syndrome, to say, and some people call it fake it till you make it. I don't like that phrase so much, because I don't think you're faking it. I think you're saying,
it's like, figure it out.
Yeah, I'm going to be a master of figuring crap out. That's what I'm going to be. That's not the fake it till you make it. Fake it means it implies that there's some kind of fraud. Figuring it out implies that there's some confidence in your ability to self-educate and quickly and execute on something you've never done before.
I like that. I've got a couple of Band-Aids that I use for imposter syndrome.
Okay.
So these are not like the deep psychological therapy-based solutions, for the rest of your life, but they work for alleviating it for a short time for me. So one of them is less thinking, more doing. And you mentioned how you don't feel like an imposter in your coaching course. Neither do I. I jump on with 15 people live, and I get questions fired at me, and I advise their business with a bunch of people looking on, and I don't feel the least bit shaky doing it.
Yeah.
I feel entirely confident in my abilities, and presenting style doesn't bother me at all. It probably did, a while back, but now it's totally fine.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't feel like an imposter. But where I do feel like an imposter is when I'm not talking with people, and I'm not really doing anything, and I'm just sat there and I'm bouncing around inside my own head.
Yeah.
And I just start overthinking and doubting, usually when I'm alone and no one's around. That's where it kind of creeps back in.
You're the devil on that shoulder starts whispering in your ear, saying, "Hey, you're actually a loser."
Yeah. And I've noticed when I'm doing more, I kind of don't give myself time to feel that. I hold it at bay. And so I realize maybe that's not the healthiest solution. I don't know. But it works for me, because when I'm, going from thing to thing to thing, and it doesn't always have to be work. It could be like I get some downtime with my partner.
Yeah.
I see my friends. I dive into work. I respond to 100 DMs. I leave some voice notes. I put out some content. When I'm doing, I'm pretty good. I'm fine. It's just when I stop, and not always when I stop, but sometimes when I stop and I start thinking, I'm like, oh man, what about this, and this? And am I good enough? So that's where it creeps in. So that's Band-Aid number one.
Good Band-Aid. Get out of your own
less
head.
Thinking.
Yeah, less thinking, more doing.
And kind of an extension of that, Band-Aid number two is get out of your own head, but into someone else's. Because a lot of it's alleviated by just me doing a bunch of crap, but it's really alleviated when I actually focus on what someone else is going through. and trying to help them and empathize with them is the key. Because I don't have time to bounce around in my own head if I live in someone else's. So if I'm there and I'm thinking, man, like, what are they going through? What would help them? How can I do a better job of serving them?
Yeah.
Then I'm not in my own head doubting my abilities. I'm in theirs trying to understand them better.
Okay. I like that too.
So that's what I do basically.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect
solution. Those are
solution,
your two Band-Aids?
Yeah.
Okay, so Band-Aid number 3 is ask somebody else's opinion about how you're doing, somebody you trust, somebody you know that supports you and helps you and inspires and motivates you, one of those trusted people in your life. So Tom, for example, you this morning asked me, you were reaching out to a company for some collaboration or something, and you said, hey, can you shoot me over a 1 to 2 sentence little testimonial?
I don't think I've read it yet, actually.
Oh yeah, okay, well you should read it. Because I wrote it right off and sent it to you. But you, Tom, if you're ever feeling self-doubt, reach out to Mike, because Mike holds you in high esteem, and Mike will tell you what is really happening in your life and what you should really be thinking about yourself. And that's a great way to put a Band-Aid on this imposter syndrome, is to get an actual perspective of other people and what is really going on, not what's going on in your head.
I'll give you one right now. And I like that. I think that's a great tip. I say this about very few people, but you've got it in terms of like you're switched on. You got the glint in the eye, the energy, and like you're a sharp guy, right? And you can tell that. And that's not something I apply to everyone. In fact, there's tons of like smart people where I don't think that way about them. And there's a very select number of people in my life where I'm like, they just got that thing. Yeah. And I think that of you. And also you're one of the most ambitious people I know. And ambition kind of comes out of every pore, and you get super competitive with yourself and always want to push it forward. And you're a hell of a creative. So, that is my perception of you. That would be some of the first stuff that springs to mind.
Thank you. And I feel less imposter syndrome now being on this podcast with you, because I know that you have that perception of me, and I hold you in high esteem as well. So that's why this works. That's why you and I can sit and talk, because we both admire the counterpart. And so you are quickly, I mean, we've only been interacting like this for the last 6 months or so, but you're quickly one of these inner people that if I'm ever needing some kind of validation, you're one of the people I'm going to go to. And I have a few that are years of relationship and things, but man, it's you've got to have this trusted circle. Believe the trusted circle. Don't believe the people who don't know you at all. And so the trusted circle over the massive followers and stuff that you can't really like control as not that you're controlling your inner circle, but you know what I mean. Like, they carry more weight than like the fluctuating freaking like counts or the trolls or the people that have no bearing on your life, really. Yeah, exactly. So you got to put it in perspective of who are you listening to when it comes to validation. And imposter syndrome, I think a lot of people that really struggle with it, they still care about the troll who's in their comments that says this post sucks, or that sends you an email and says your business sucks, or the client who tells you that you do crappy work. It's all these people. You got to somehow turn off that switch of caring about those people. We've mentioned Gary Vee. We'll probably mention Gary Vee once per episode on here. But man, I saw a post that he did. He said, my key to happiness, this is a paraphrase, but his key to happiness is that he doesn't believe the people that tell him he's amazing any more than he believes the people who tell him he sucks. And his happiness comes from not listening to the praise and not listening to the haters either, but just turning it off and being completely self-aware and self-confident in knowing who he is. So this is paraphrasing some of Gary Vee's content. He's the master of it. he can get on and say anything that comes to mind. It's his truth, another thing that he says. And he doesn't care if it isn't the truth for other people. It's his truth. He's completely confident in his truth and shares it, shouts it from the rooftops, and has built a massively loyal audience and great brand reputation as a result of it.
Yeah, I'd say maybe I'm 20% of the way there.
Yeah.
And I saw that post as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a great ambition to have that mindset more. But yeah, I'll be straight up. Like I enjoy the positive feedback, and I can feel knocked at times by the negative feedback. Not that there is much, but what I do know is I feel both less than I used to.
Yeah.
The longer I go at this game, I feel it less. And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I agree with Gary there. It feels really good. It has less bearing on me now.
Yeah. And it does me too. Some of that for me is due to the fact that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When I was growing my agency and I had massive overhead, payroll, mouths to feed, families with kids at home relying on this business to be successful, I felt an enormous amount of pressure to succeed, to make it great. I'm fortunate to be in a situation where it doesn't matter right now. I could lose all my followers on Instagram. It would be a massive blow to me emotionally, but it would not put me out of my home and on welfare. And so when you get to a certain level where you can sit back and say, I don't care. I don't care what happens. Then it's completely liberating to go and be who you really are. And I think that this is where Gary Vee has built such an audience that he could lose half his audience and still have millions and millions of loyal fans. He could lose half his audience and still sell 1 million copies of whatever book is next. He could still sell out whatever convention he goes to, losing half his followers or 3/4 of his followers. He's financially at a point where who cares? And so it liberates you.
I can see how that would be very freeing, but just to counter that a little bit, I do think whatever scale you're at, it can still impact you, right?
Oh, yeah.
But because, we've both reached points which younger versions of ourselves never would have dreamed of,
right,
career-wise, and that feels amazing and very grateful for that. But as they say, it's like when you have it, you're scared of losing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Only if you're on the hook for it. I think that this is where...
Yeah, like the fact that you're essentially retired.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very jealous of that. That seems pretty chilled.
It's pretty good. If I had the Lamborghini...
You're giving me nothing back there. You're like, it's pretty great.
It's pretty good. I'm not going to complain.
Yeah. You'll love it in 20 years.
Yeah. No, it's not going to be 20 years for you. You're going to hit it faster than I hit it. But if you are on the hook for your Lamborghini payment and your mansion payment, and you have this overhead, personal or business, it changes the game because you become tentative to make a wrong decision.
Yeah.
And by not making some wrong decisions, you're making less right decisions. And it stops you in your tracks of fear of misstepping, either good or bad.
So there's a personal trainer whose content I follow, and I was listening to his podcast a few months ago, and he was talking about mental health, and he said that a lot of his close friends told him, you have unknowingly crafted a lifestyle that is basically perfect for maintaining positive mental health. And he was doing a lot of the things that science recommends, the exercise and sun and work-life balance and all these various things. And he was just kind of unconsciously doing them, but they just ensured that he retained a very, very good level of mental health. And for me, you have to build that lifestyle, that structure and those systems and habits around yourself, because the intent is not enough. Everyone can listen to this episode and be like, I'd like to feel like less of an imposter. That would be a nice outcome, but it's not going to happen by magic. And equally, it won't happen if you just go and do something for a week and then go back to your old habits.
Yeah.
And so I think there probably are things, and we've covered some of them in this episode, you know, the touching base with your inner circle, the stepping away from it all, you know, maybe you didn't want to throw in that, you know, scheduled time for gratitude and reflection, whatever it might be. I think you actually need to make these things an ongoing habitual part of your life, like where they feed your conscious and your subconscious every single week. You're kind of just through your structure and your schedule, you're ticking things off that are just going to keep you on like an even keel with this stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know I can get to that darker place of feeling like a fraud. It's normally a slippery slope. It's where I kind of disregard some of my healthier habits, and before I know it, you know, they kind of stack up, and I'm like, oh, well, I stopped doing that, and then that fell by the wayside, and then I started working too late. And before I know it, I've done 10 bad decisions, and I'm a week into this like sliding slope, and then I'm sat feeling like a fraud. But it didn't suddenly come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I think the same way it's like we brush our teeth and we shower every day to maintain personal hygiene, I think we need to maintain good mental health by having habits and structure.
Yeah. So let's go down some of the habits that that people do. There are things like meditation. There are things like gratitude journals.
I got the 5-minute journal. So every morning now is like, I've been doing that for, you know, a year or something now.
Yeah.
Like, what are you grateful for? 3 things every morning. It's a small thing, but
it's really great. It's a great technique. I don't do those things in tangible manner. You know, I don't do a gratitude journal in writing, but I do in my head. It's part of my habitual way of living is to look around and say, man, I'm so grateful for this and that and this, you know, just living with a style of gratitude.
Sometimes, listeners, I will jump on the call and Mike's already here and he's been warming up, waiting for me. And I can just see him looking at himself captured by the camera, and he's just saying, man, you're a handsome son of a bitch. He just keeps saying it over and over. He doesn't even realize I've joined. He's just talking to himself, very arrogant, and but it works for him.
What is this is not true, but what is that SNL skit with the where he looks in the mirror, he said, you're good looking. You're Arthur Smalley or something, or I'm
we didn't get so much of it in the UK. I feel like I missed out.
All right, I gotta find that one.
Send me a link.
Yeah, I will. But it's looking in your mirror. I read the book Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins, last year, and really interesting book. He's the only person who has completed all of the U.S. Special Forces training, from like Navy SEAL to Army Ranger. He did all of them. And he talks a lot about the mental training your brain to achieve amazing things that you think are impossible, and how he did that through those achievements. And one of the things that he talks about is the accountability mirror, of looking at yourself in the mirror and being accountable to yourself. And this idea of positive affirmations in a mirror is super effective. It's a super effective technique that
you feel pretty dumb when you start doing it, but it is effective for a reason. It is effective, yeah. And can I just say, you feel even more dumb if you're in the UK as opposed to the States, I think, because we're more reticent about that kind of thing.
Oh, funny.
As the saying goes, I think an introverted American is like an extroverted Brit.
Oh, is there a saying like that?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So I've never been to Britain, England. It's on my list, and I hope that happens this year.
Oh, cool, man.
Anyway, but Americans do have the persona, the brand persona of being perceived as arrogant, confident, outgoing.
I like it. I think we need a bit more of it in this country, to be honest.
Americans, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. You go out there, it's like you can have conversations with strangers. God forbid.
Yeah, and it's different states are different too. I mean, some states, you go to California. When we lived in California, it was, people don't have time. They don't have time.
Yeah, that's more like London.
Small talk. Yeah, a lot of big cities are like that. I was surprised that New York City wasn't like that. When I first started traveling to New York for business, the first few times I went, I was always so surprised at how nice the people were, holding doors open for you and things.
They got a bad reputation.
They got a bad reputation, but I don't think New York deserves it as much as they have it. LA, on the other hand, super great people, but they don't have time for small talk when you're in the grocery store. Yeah.
So what are some more stuff that people can do, including, I almost feel like there is a preventative checklist, but also if it's too late and it's already happened, what should you do next? You know what I mean? So it's like you tried to prevent it, but you're there, you're feeling super low, you feel like a complete fraud. What do you do next to pull yourself out of that?
Yeah. Well, this is a good question. Are you asking me off the cuff?
I'm hoping you can cover this one. Over to you, Mike.
The trick. Yeah. How do you pull yourself out of it? You know what? I try to turn it off. I try to turn off whatever it is that's making me feel that way. And you said less thinking, more doing. And I think that's just critical. Say you build a great post for social media and then you post it and it doesn't get any engagement, and you thought that this was going to be the post that breaks you out. And then you're sitting there thinking, oh man, I'm a fraud. I thought this was going to do so well and nobody shared it or nobody liked it. And why?
I think I know the answer to this, right?
Okay.
You have to immediately after 5 minutes of it not performing, you have to delete it. And then you have to post another one showing slightly more leg. Is that the answer?
There's a temptation for that. That's the mindset. Yeah. It's like, oh, it didn't do good. Now I'm a loser. I got to delete it and move on. Instead, you've got to say, all right, forget that. I'm not going to think about that anymore. I'm going on to the next. I'm moving on to the next. And
shut it down, maybe. Like, I know I can go down a real rabbit hole with social media, but same thing if I'm like digging into some aspects of like accounts or whatever, really. You get blinkered, you go down the rabbit hole and you feel worse and worse. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, you know what, just put the screen device down, close the laptop, and walk away and, go get some fresh air or something. Just get away from it, because you're not going to dig yourself out of it in that moment. You just have to leave.
Yeah. And some of it is if there are people that you follow, I think we talked about this at one point, but if there are people that you follow that make you feel more imposter syndrome or make you feel less than for whatever reason, don't hesitate to mute those people. Don't hesitate to turn off notifications that person has posted content. Get that.
And there's a fine line, isn't there? Because you want to be motivated and inspired by people doing amazing things, but equally sometimes they make you feel like a piece of crap.
Yeah.
I think this is why I've heard you're only friends with people who are shorter than you, right?
Yeah, shorter and not as good looking.
Yeah, shorter and uglier.
And so I only have two people that I'm friends with. That's so American right there. That's American style humor. So, but don't be afraid to turn off the people who make you feel less than your best self. And, going down to this imposter syndrome, maybe this is why this just hit me, but maybe this is why we didn't hear so much about it for 30 years after it was invented. And now you can't not hear about it at least once a week, because social media has created, not intentionally, but the byproduct of social media has created a world filled with imposter syndrome. Because we see what other people are doing and we can more easily compare our loserness to their greatness.
Yep.
And imposter syndrome has become more and more prevalent as a result of it.
I would agree. I really don't remember feeling it as much back in the day on not on such a kind of consistent, regular basis. But going back to our old friend Gary V, gets a couple of mentions in this episode. Yeah. I was listening to one of his podcasts today, actually, and he talked about social media essentially being an empty vessel. And whilst it gets a lot of blame for stuff like this, it is an empty platform, and we are the ones that fill it with this stuff.
Yeah.
So he was kind of pinning the blame on like, actually it's human beings that are doing this stuff, and all it's doing is shining a light on our true natures, and in some cases amplifying it. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's like, you know, imposter syndrome was around before social media. It's just now it's right there in our face, and we're all kind of rubbing it in each other's faces in some propensity, and I think that can be harmful. So the tip of auditing your feed is huge. If you are following Kim Kardashian and every time you look at her it makes you feel ugly and poor, then don't follow her. You know, it's fine. Perfect example.
I'm going to unfollow her today. I don't follow Kim Kardashian. But it is true. It's anybody who creates that in you. It's your fault for following them. Don't follow them. Stop. Control what comes in, and you're going to feel better about how you feel inside.
Yeah, like I've got so I mentioned my brother, I've got 2 stepsisters as well, and they're like a fair amount younger than both my brother and I. And they're in their early 20s now, but when they were teenagers, I remember like hearing, I guess, a lot of the teenage insecurities that people go through, and I was getting the female perspective. But it really kind of brought back, like, you know, I'd been through my own teenage insecurities, and it let me remember them. And it was very interesting to get their perspective on what they got from like earlier stage social media, beauty magazines, and that kind of thing. And I looked at it, I was like, why are you like consuming that stuff? It's so harmful. Like it's shocking what is in most publications and magazines and that kind of thing. It's hugely detrimental for body image and all kinds of stuff. And I just thought, oh man, like if you were consuming some healthier stuff that's actually going to teach, you know, values and ambition and celebrate people, and I just think it's one of the most transformative things you can do. And actually, when I look at inflection points in my career, in no small part, I mixed up who my business mentors were, both people I dealt with personally, but also people where I consumed their content. That literally is the catalyst to some of the biggest shifts in my career. Is I stopped listening to certain people and I listened to better people. Yeah,
it's really great. All right. Well, this has been a fun conversation about imposter syndrome. Should we do a little tennis match recap?
Yes, yeah. I think we've got like 5 minutes, so let's do it, man.
All right, so why don't you throw on point number 1 as a takeaway that you want to make sure people get out of this podcast?
Cool. Normally I note these down, but I haven't, so I'm going to have to remember them all.
Okay, you go for it. I noted them down, so when you get stuck, I'll throw one in.
All right. So yeah, I'll throw out my couple of Band-Aids that I mentioned. More doing, less thinking, and get out of your head and into someone else's. So focus more on empathizing with other people and get out of your own thinking.
Okay. Those are great Band-Aids. One that we touched on was start caring less. Care less about the praise and care less about the negativity. Care about the stuff somewhere in the middle. And that was a Gary Vee tip from a video that you and I both saw the other day, and I think it's great feedback. Do you have another one that popped in mind?
So imposter syndrome is closely linked in my mind to mental health, in that you can't always talk yourself out of it. You can't always just use logic to find your way out of it. It is not logical. It's a feeling. It's a horrible sinking feeling at times. So, you know what? Allow yourself to feel it, realize it's normal, and don't further berate yourself and further make yourself feel bad for not being able to pull yourself out of it immediately, because that's normal.
Yeah. And the reason it's normal, this is another point that I made, the reason it's normal is that because if you are going to progress in your career and in your life, you are putting yourself in a position where you are likely to feel imposter syndrome. You're taking on responsibilities of things that you've never done before. You have to trust your ability to figure it out and solve it, but you're going to feel like an imposter. Running your first company with 20 employees, you're going to feel like an imposter if you've only ever managed a team of 2 people. Yep. And you just got to go in and you've got to try and sort it out, figure it out.
I like it. I'm going to steal one of your points, but rely on your inner circle.
Yes.
So not a bunch of strangers or people who don't really know you, the people very close to you in your life, and get their actual truthful feedback. Encourage raw honesty from them about how you're doing and how you're holding up. And that should give you some healthy perspective.
Yeah, it's good. Have the person who you trust, that you know that if you're ever feeling it, you're going to reach out to Tom, and Tom is going to tell you a bunch of stuff that's great about you and why you shouldn't be feeling it. Have somebody in your inner circle who is your pep talk person. Most people have somebody like that, somebody who loves them and cares about them enough to help them through the slumps in life, and make sure that that person is your go-to when you start feeling it. One that you mentioned more was good habits promote good mental health. Good habits. Exercise, eating healthy, sleep. Man, sleep is so critical. So critical. You and I have talked about this before, but sleep. Okay, here's one for you. My wife doesn't abide by this rule, but I say no talking after 10 p.m. There's no talking after 10 p.m. I have nothing good to add to our marriage after 10 p.m. I'm just not mentally equipped to give you a good conversation after 10 p.m. So let's not talk after 10 p.m. It doesn't go well.
I was going to say.
It doesn't go well.
How draconian are you about this? Like, is your wife trying to make small talk and you're like, shh?
So it's not so bad, but it's like, honey, when I'm feeling it, man, when I'm feeling down and slumpy, it's not the time to go and start analyzing the day. It's not the time to go, if I'm feeling like I'm in imposter syndrome, it's not the time to talk about it at 11 o'clock at night or midnight. Man, go to sleep. Get up in the morning with fresh energy and better mental health, and then address it then. I mean, these are just some thoughts on good mental health practices. So take that into consideration. All right. You had another one?
This might have to be the last two.
Okay.
But I would say audit your feed, audit the content you're consuming, because that has a huge bearing on how you're going to feel about yourself.
Good. And then the final one is some kind of self-reflection that is positive, a positivity journal, meditation, prayer, whatever it is in your life that helps center you on reality is an effective way to help you navigate imposter syndrome.
Love it. And just to clarify, that is the old Mike Janda, you're a good-looking son of a bitch. That's the main affirmation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Man, I'm feeling so good today.
You got to be, there you go, right? Yeah. And you got to do like the finger pistols as you're, exactly, as you're saying that to yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
Cool.
Stuart Smalley is the Saturday Night Live skit.
Check it out. Check this out. Yeah.
It's the mirror. I'm pretty sure that's the name, but the positive affirmations in the mirror. Don't be afraid of it.
I love it. Thanks so much, man. That was a fun episode. I hope it helps all of you amazing listeners at home. And just let us know what you think of the show. Like, iTunes reviews mean the absolute world to us. And as always, tag us up in your stories, Instagram posts. Let us know if you're listening to the show, if you're enjoying it. Basically, we need your affirmations, guys, on the back of this episode. We need your good feedback.
Like imposters.
Next week we're just going to be in a dark corner rocking, holding our knees, and a couple of frauds. So, feed our egos.
It's good. Hey, and also our Biz Buddies, we are open to content topics. We put together a list of probably 30, 40 things that we want to address in this podcast, but we want to talk about the things that are most important to you. So don't hesitate to shoot us ideas of content that you want to hear about, because we're open to your suggestions and want to really provide the value that you need in your career at this time.
It's a great point. Yeah, definitely want the show to be organic and community driven. We said that from the start, right? So I love it, Mike. Okay. I think that's it from us. We will see you next time.
All right. Looking forward to it.